Let me introduce the next panel discussion. I'm not sure if there's relationship advice included in this one as well. We wait and see. Who knows? It's improving the digital customer experience, and what the panel hopes to cover in this session is delivering superior customer experience with connected banking. And don't we need a better customer experience across the board wherever we go? And then leveraging artificial intelligence to provide personalized services and creating seamless experiences. And then financial wellness engagement and AI-driven coaching. So it's quite a bit to get through. Moderating this particular panel discussion is Megaree Naraidoo. Don't fall over that one. Enterprise architect at AVBOB. And she'll be joined by her panelist, Shoaib Nathi, CIO at CIB. And then it's John Bosco Arends, who's the chairperson of the Chartered CIO Council, and he's also Group Head of Information and Network Technology Operations at the City of Johannesburg. And then Rene Moodley, Head of Operations and IT at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange Private Placements. So with that, let me welcome our moderator, Megaree, on stage, and her panel, and please give them a warm round of applause as they make their way up here.
Thanks, everyone, and welcome. Wow, what a wealth of knowledge and experience we have amongst our esteemed panelists. Gentlemen, let's get right into it.
Sure.
So, whilst the pandemic seems like something of way back in the past, it has left many companies feeling exposed, and their processes and technology stacks have not been sufficient to meet the rapid technology demands and shifting business needs. According to Henry Mintzberg, a Canadian academic, a strategic revolution is taking place in order to regain stability. If I may start with Shoaib, what would you say are some of the techniques you have put in place to build a strong foundation that enables adaptability, resilience, and agility?
Thanks. Is this thing working? Can everybody hear me? All right. I think it's an interesting question because we're sitting in a room full of IT people or technologists. So I'll talk about my own experience. I'll personalize this as much as I can. I think it also depends on what you inherit when you join a particular organization. So I think the key for me is to actually look at the mess that you're in. So you get in there and you assess the mess. And the first thing that you know that you're going to be measured on is what are your quick wins whilst you're trying to sort out the mess. So for me, one of the first points that one needs to look at is what is your risk register? What is the enterprise risk register? What is the pain points that the organization is actually wanting to address by bringing you in the first place? And I think often we get ourselves caught in the sexiness of the title, and you don't realize that typically when you go into an organization, there's still a lot of legacy and there's still a lot of operational stuff that you need to deal with. So that's really what I'm saying, is to build on the foundation, you need to make sure that the operational stability is there. Once you started focusing on that and applying some of the resources there, the next challenge you often find is that, and we all understand this, is the scarcity of resources, economics 101. So there's lots of stuff that needs to be done, there's lots of ideas, but there's not enough people and there's not enough money to do it. So the next step would be to prioritize. Make sure the board and your fellow executive team understands exactly what it is that they want you to focus on. Get that on your KPIs and then focus on those things. Things like disaster recovery, business continuity are key. Often organizations are focused on those because that's where they've previously had significant failures. And then I think once you've got some of those things in place, remember we've also inherited as technologists, we inherit apart from a set of problems, we also inherit a set of broken processes, and a lot of times we also inherit a set of people. So now you've got to now challenge yourself to how do you lead this set of people through the fact that you are now trying to reimagine the technology stack within the organization you're in, and you need to point them all in the right direction. So it's about getting the people on your side and making sure, very similar to what we saw on the slide in the previous presentation, where everybody's around that individual and understands what the value that an individual brings to the organization. And then, of course, I think we move into the next stage, which is once your foundations are solid in place, you've got the right team, you've got the right operational stability, you can start looking at the next phase, which would be to really start adding business value, driving innovation, et cetera, et cetera. So I think often what we as technologists forget is it happens in phases. Set the foundation.
We're actually business leaders, and we need to think of the business value that we're adding. I think also importantly is if you can't tell the story based on your data, we're missing a huge chunk of it.
Definitely.
So leading on to that, according to Forrester, and in response to the COVID-19 crisis, 52% of companies accelerated the AI adoption. I am sure all of your organizations have and are very proud of your petabytes of data that you've collected over the years. But Rene, specifically to your organization, using this data to drive differentiated experiences for both customers and your employees and contribute to a customer-centric culture, what are some of the things you can share with us?
Yes, and I think those are some beautiful stats. And if you look at from a pivotal perspective, you know, if you're not being a disruptor, you're going to be disrupted. And I think it's such a key takeaway for the JSE, because we've been a large incumbent for so many decades. And we said, let's disrupt the market, let's change that to some new businesses that we're launching, which is quite exciting. But I think, you know, coming back or circling back to your question, you know, as a customer experience, you know, almost buzzword, we always think that the tool is going to solve the problem. You know, let's get a sexy CRM, let's put that into our organization, and all our problems are going to be solved. And you know, heaven behold, we found out that that's definitely not the case. And you find that there's sort of two spheres, right? And we haven't coined this phrase; we've you know, taken that overseas as well. If you look at, there's a CRM component which talks about the relationship of our customer, and that's really collecting objective data, right? Example, personal details, what have they bought previously, when's the next referral point, et cetera, et cetera. But there's another sphere that we sort of skip over, and that's the CEM component, which is the customer experience management piece. And what is the attitude of our customer? What's the behavior? How do we measure happiness? And we so often forget that we're dealing with human beings, and human beings are actually emotional beings trying to have a logical experience. And I think it's critical that we sort of capitalize on what is the experience of our customer and sort of superimpose that into understanding our customer. So going deeper into the point you're making about how do we segment our customers and how do we understand and treat them as individuals. And so what we've done is, we said from a customer perspective, we compartmentalize the customers into sort of segmentations, right? And those segmentations needs to be built on something that was coined by Harvard professor Clay Christensen, who talks about the jobs to be done. So not talking about your product, but talking about how do we sort of capitalize and sort of achieve the objective that the customer is looking for. A good analogy there is, you know, a customer is looking for actually a painting, and they want to put a painting in their house. And so they come to your retail store and they buy a hammer and they buy a nail. And so we're so often trying to sell the hammer and the nail, but not actually looking at what we're trying to solve, which is actually put a painting in my house. And I think it's so critical that we sit back and try to understand what is the problem that the client is trying to resolve. And I think that's what differentiates the JSE, that's what differentiates our new business. And I think a couple more perspectives to that is really capitalizing on experience And how does one go about doing that? We look at obviously proactive communication, reactive communication, and there's a whole host of measures one can partake in to do that. Again, I think to your question, coming back internally, how do we cultivate that for our employees? And there's sort of two pieces. The one is that aspects that people already know, which is KPIs or KPAs, and measuring our individuals from an objective and subjective manner. But also we need to take accountability and say, what is the culture we are cultivating to create innovation, to create happiness, to create that experience at a branch where I have a smile when I see a customer. And I think those are the critical, pivotal aspects that we try to do differently.
Thanks, Rene. I think one of the touch points that you said is everyone's perception or an individual's perception becomes a reality, and we have to manage that carefully. So, contact centers have been around and have been the forefront of engaging with customers to provide a human, personal experience. John, what are some of the changes or culture shifts, as Rene has mentioned, that you have experienced in your data or contact centers with regards to, as well as the robotization of humans and how you've personalized that experience?
When it comes to the contact center as a capability, I can talk to all the buzzwords you want to hear. I can talk to you about mean time to resolve, mean time to close, all the fancy stuff that we want to do from an analytics or from a IT professional perspective. But one thing that we have learned around contact centers, it's about real people. It's not numbers, it's not stats on a graph, it's actual people that come and contact you through your contact center. Now, taking an experience in government and public sector, that contact center experience includes taking a taxi at 6 o'clock in the morning so you can beat the queue before the city opens, before Department of Health opens, before social development opens. It includes planning your day, making sure that you have the money to actually get there, to stand in that long queue, get a ticket and go sit and go through a process. It also includes having a problem in the first place that you need to contact someone with. So one of the things that we started understanding about contact centers, especially when it comes into the public experience area, is that a contact center is a result of issues that have occurred. And how you then identify them, how you deal with them, how you make that journey through that contact center moment better, is by providing the right kind of initiatives that will prevent them actually having to physically come and talk to someone. Because remember, most of the contact center experience today are going contactless, which means there's a little screen somewhere, there's something on my phone, there's a little app, there is somebody I can call, and I speak to this person remotely, and we haven't got that touch and feel. And I think when we went through the COVID experience, the contact center experience started pushing more and more contactless. But unfortunately, the reality in a country like South Africa is, because of longevity of life, we find ourselves with a lot of people that grew up in the absence of technology, where a personal handshake, a personal promise means something. Therefore, they will sit in queues and actually go and queue outside Department of Home Affairs, as an example, to go out and actually talk to someone and see that the forms are there and see that somebody is actually doing the very next thing. So when you look at your contact center experience and you take the walk-in experience from a contact center, you need to be able to make sure that when you start going contactless, that you actually create the capacity to assist those that are not technology literate. So you find these days that the deployment of kiosks becomes part and parcel of engaging that contactless experience into your walk-in community from a contact center perspective. Because within the city context, as an example, we've got contact centers. If you want to query your bill, you're going to go to one of our contact centers, you're going to walk in there, you're going to get a number, you're going to sit there and wait until they call you, and you're going to share your storyline with them, and eventually something would be changing or something would be done to fix that particular problem. So my understanding, and I think the view that I'm taking around contact centers, is that firstly, as a strategy for contact centers, what you need to understand are 5 very important things. Why are people contacting me in the first place? Is it to increase my revenue? Is it to complain about my service? Is it to get a promise fulfilled? Is it disgruntlement with the quality that we are delivering? Or is it somebody that wants to find out what you are all about? So I think when you start answering those kind of questions, it becomes then easier to deploy the type of contact center technologies that you have in your arsenal, and how to then deal with different demographics around the contact center environment. So I think it's very, very important that in the contact center space, you must make sure that the experience or the engagement, the journey of going through the contact center experience are outcomes-based. Because if you are not going to do that, it's going to be very difficult for you to even classify the journey in the first place. It's going to be difficult for you to put the right technology for the right demographic, the right type of customer for them to engage. I sit on my phone 99% of the time when I'm active, okay? And the reason for that is because I found my telephone or my cell phone to become the vehicle through which I can communicate. I can contact my bank, I can see the balance, I can do things, I can request new services, I can check my credit score, I can apply for additional things, I can stop a current service. But for someone who is not technology-centric or is technology-enabled, how do you then create the same experience while at the same time creating a learning environment through which somebody eventually, after a couple of tries, with assistance from someone physical assisting them. Forget about the bots and all these things that we want to do in a contactless environment. The bots work for someone like me. They don't work for my aunt. They don't work for the cousin down the road. They don't work for the guy who hasn't finished matric but does certain things and can understand when he speaks to someone. Or that is technology scared, you know, when they actually see something, which button do I really press, where do I engage? So I think those are the balances that we need to build into that contact experience.
Thanks, John. I think you make an important point. We've got to equip our users and the customers out there with more information through a digital experience, but also not forgetting the human personal experience that goes with that. And so often we're so focused on automation of everything and trying to reduce and create efficiencies where we can, and you know, forgetting these kind of important experiences. So having said that, according to Forbes, customer experience is today's business benchmark. Rene, what are some of the tools or criteria you've put in place to measure customer experience, and how is this being utilized to improve the digital experience that we speak about as well?
Excellent. And I think touching on the point that my colleague just mentioned now is, if you look at some of the stats, even 60% of the technology is actually replacing sales. So almost your technology is becoming a sales tool, right? If you think about it, they're becoming your ambassador. So I think it's so critical that the customer experience piece that you're referring to plays such a pivotal role. And I think, you know, coming down to, you know, almost the nuts and bolts in terms of what tools are there. I think one example, I made a colleague in the back in terms of Lead Squared as an example. You got Salesforce, you got Zendesk, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not getting any royalties for this, but but having the right CRM is critical. Having a CRM that sort of embeds into your ecosystem, is fit for purpose in terms of your business. I think there are a couple of measures just to make sure you pick the right tool for the job. I think a second component, and then coming back to a question you phrased earlier, which is the customer experience component. I think it's really a golden thread through all panelists. So I have definitely a takeaway in terms of experience. Is really something we coined around the 5 Ps, and that's something we utilize to measure our experience in the JSE itself. So the first one really talks about purposeful experience. So if we're engaging with the customer, what is the purpose? And more often than not, we always think purpose from our perspective. It's actually the other way around. What is the purpose that the client is trying to get from us? So when I pick up the phone and I say, hi, how are you doing? What is their objective that they would like to achieve? So we always put that lens on. I know it's easier said than done, but I think it's critical to sort of look at the purpose through the lens of the customer. The second one is personal. It's easy to look at a data list or an Excel list of 100 clients and say, let's phone all of them and sort of send the same message. But it's critical to come back to enablement of your tech, enablement of the CRM, to sort of capitalize on what is the experience of the customer, as we spoke about earlier, the happiness of the customer. Can I leverage of saying, your last experience was a little bit okay, let's increase that experience to be better. That slightly personal touch goes such a long way in terms of building relationships. The next one is persistence, and persistence are probably a double-edged sword. There's probably a negative side to persistence, but I think there's also a positive side. The positive side of persistence really is saying, how do we sort of keep ourselves real, keep sort of interacting with the customer? Because again, there's a job to be done, right? And you don't know when that job to be done from the customer is going to occur. So the question is, you want to stay top of mind, you want to stay relevant with the client itself. The 4th P is about periodic. So periodic saying, let's send a quarterly review. The thing that I hate the most is long surveys. It's probably a grudge-full. You can just imagine from a customer perspective, when have you filled in almost a 10-page survey? Never. And even if you have filled it in, it's probably coming with data that's incorrect, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's critical to look at the mechanism you use and the attitude the customer is filling through those type of mechanisms. The last one is pulse. And pulse is a little bit of a selfish one. It talks about how do we sort of send out the pulse of what we have to offer? And how can we enable you to be better? So from a JSE perspective, how are we able to sort of help you raise capital? And so being front in mind, and as one knows, from a substitute perspective, there's obviously banks one can go to, et cetera, and we're saying there is a differentiation, there is a component that the JSE has to play in that fulfillment.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Rene. I think you're touching on the points of, although the digital customer experience, stay close, understand your customer better, make the right interactions at the right time. It's how you interpret that knowledge and understanding. John, would you like to add something to that question? The tools and the criteria that you're using to measure digital customer experience and customer experience? Yeah.
When it comes to the measurement of customer experience, surveys and tools, as the colleague has said, are a means towards an end. However, when we look at things from a government perspective, we have a couple of things that we look at as well. Because remember, if you take yourself as a personal experience going to any platform, there are 4 things that you expect should be there. And if any one of those are wrong, you would actually have a negative experience. Firstly is, who am I? When I log on to that platform, will it know who I am? Will it have a single view of my identity? Will it have a single view of my portfolio? If I take banking as an example, will it have that single view that says, we know you've got this, you've got this, you've got this, you've got all these things that makes you John. The second one that's also important to improve that experience is the what do I have? Yes, we know that you've logged this call, you've got an application that's outstanding, it's in this phase, it's in that phase, and it tells you what you have, but it also tells you the next point, which is what you can have. Did you know that if you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can save money, you can have this, you can have a better thing, you can have a better portfolio, you can have all these things. You know, those upsell, if we call it the upsell market, right? But it's the stuff that I could have because you know now who I am and what I have. The last one for us is the why are you here today? And actually managing that journey of the what do you want today, I think is going to be built by proper data. Data is knowledge, and knowledge is power. And unfortunately, within the industry at the moment, there is so much knowledge, but so little skill to turn it into power. And I think what we need to then start looking at is how do we then develop those skills that would then continuously evolve to keep up with the technologies that we are deploying. And I think that is where the opportunity lies.
Thanks, John. Interesting points, because I think often enough, like we said, the digital experience is more about being reactive, allowing the client to select what they want and, making that service available. But what you're saying is it's important to also be proactive and almost know why your client is contacting you. Have that view in mind. Interesting. Thank you. So there's been quite a hype around omni-channel, and we've all heard this word, this buzzword being used a few times. And the real-time support and automation of mundane tasks. Shoaib, what are some of those digital strategies that you are implementing to optimize the customer journey?
Yeah, good question. I'm going to read something that I prepared for this question, so just bear with me for a second. So I think there's a lot of confusion out there with regards to the question around digital versus digitize, but I'm not going to go into that discussion here. So for me, digital is about looking at business processes. So I'm looking internally here within our organizations, and I'm saying digital is about looking at business processes, making them more streamlined and efficient, with a focus on speed, ease of use, and most importantly, the customer experience. Some of you may have come across this quote before from Bill Gates, but I'll read it in any case for those that have never heard it. The first rule of any technology used in a business is that automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify the efficiency. The second is that automation applied to an inefficient organization or operation will magnify the inefficiency. So I think, again, as technologists, we get, again, ourselves all excited about the tech, and we want to be in omni-channel, and we want to be here and there and everywhere, right? But if your business processes have not been optimized, then putting technology on top of that is actually just going to create bigger problems. So for me, in our business, I mean, we in insurance, you guys spoke about contact sensors, you spoke about the moment of truth. So in insurance, the moment of truth is when? When you've got a claim, isn't that? Mm-hmm. So you're getting that seamless, getting that to be a wow experience. That's where we deliver the promise that we make. So in our business, I've focused on making sure that we try to optimize our processes as much as possible before we layer technology over it. And then, of course, again, it depends on how deep your pockets are, because none of us have endless dev budgets or endless budgets to throw at different types of technology. So you can't obviously move all of your processes away from your legacy systems. Your legacy systems have been there for years, and they run some of the biggest parts of your internal operations in the back end. And some of those things, of course, to enhance your customer experience, John spoke about it in the banking example, is when I log on, I want that system to know who I am. I want that system to know what I have. Now, if some of that's sitting in the legacy, how do you get that now into a more modern user interface, be it a mobile device or something like that. So for us, it's been a question of how do we apply whatever we've already got? So we've got an app, we've got a website, we've got systems, we've got intermediaries or brokers that interface with our systems. How do we stitch all of these things together? And I just want to focus a bit on the intermediary or a broker here for a second. So if you look at probably most of the people in this room, you probably categorize yourselves into either high net worth or maybe just below high net worth. And I'm not judging any of you, I'm just using a concept here. What I'm saying is a high net worth individual in the South African context still primarily relies on a broker to facilitate their insurance. And if you use a broker to facilitate your insurance, when the moment of truth occurs, when you need to claim, your broker is often saying to the insurer, us, I also want to be part of that experience. I want my client to know that I'm there and I'm holding his hand. So how do you then create the seamless relationship between client, intermediary, and the insurer? And so for us, it's about stitching all these technology elements together rather than saying mobile first, web first, etc. It's about saying which pockets of what functionality will we leave in the system that's best suited for that, but make it more streamlined so that it hands over at the right place, even if it needs to hand over, to John's point, to a human.
Thanks, Shoaib. Rene, would you like to add something to that?
Yes, I think, if you look at customer experience, and I just love the conversation around where we find ourselves around, the experience within as an individual. Sounds spiritual, right? But if you think about it, we always segment data or compartmentalize data. And let me give you a quick analogy. So as an example, I'm Rene Moodley, a male, Johannesburg, etc. And there's probably another gentleman that has the same criteria as Rene, and we all know that these two people are not the same. And I think that's where you want to get to, right? That's really the golden nugget, is not just saying, let's sort of compare a like for like, but where is the uniqueness within our customers?
Thanks. So with that, what would you say is contributing to the enhancing digital customer engagement, John?
What is contributing towards it? I think there are 4 critical things that we've identified that are driving the need for a digital experience. I think the pandemic had a very good impact on all of us IT. In fact, I think it was our next Y2K. I think the last great break we had was with Y2K, when we suddenly realized that the year numbers on all our processes are going to expire. The way applications were written was exploiting the very same technologies, and we suddenly need to become Y2K compliant, and fortunately for us, most of us got it right the first time round. So the pandemic created a need for digital experience to happen. And if you were fortunate to have created collaboration channels internally to create certain things already, you were almost ready for this. And I think for the first time, business started to understand, all these little tools that IT wanted to buy are actually worth something. So I think that was the first one. The second one is that we are now dealing with a new dynamic of customer. A customer that is digitally experienced. A customer that reads the news from YouTube and Twitter and Facebook, that doesn't even know what the feel of the Star newspaper or the Sunday Times is between your index fingers when you have to open this thing and actually read it with a pair of glasses, depending how old you are. Okay, for them it's about...
Really showing your age.
Exactly. So it's about instant gratification that they want. They want everything now, and they want it on their fingertips. And because they want it on their fingertips, if you are not digitally aware in their lifestyle, they are not going to talk to you. They will make decisions what they can pull or push from that digital world. The next thing is that because of the push of the new generation of digital entrepreneurs, you find that organizations now are forced to become digitally aware, is to create that website, is to create that app that people can talk to them about or ask for pricing. I mean, let's look at Facebook as an example, right? And like my colleague said, we're not getting money for mentioning names. But if you look at Marketplace, all right? Marketplace, people were buying and selling things and they were using classified ads at one point, right? And then at some point in time, people started using other platforms, and then they realized when Marketplace came along, suddenly there were now small businesses selling their products and private people selling their products on a single space where they can talk to people, engage with products, and they can actually get things done. So I think the pandemic brought a spin-off economy around, I don't have to walk in the store to get stuff. I think what has also driven it is because we're now shopping digitally, the customers actually that are traditionalists, that wants to see the can of baked beans, that wants to see the rice in their hands, that wants to touch and feel or have that experience, to walk through a shop. Remember, when we go shopping, I don't know about you, but when me and my wife go shopping, I push the trolley, because that's the safest place to be, okay?
She
and
shops.
I make sure that I follow the leader, and we go from aisle to aisle to aisle to aisle. I know we only came for bread, sugar, and milk, but we will still go aisle to aisle for the what if. There's that special of something that I need, that I might want. I didn't come for it, but I might want. So when you look at a place like your Marketplace, it's a targeted sale. I've got this thing, I'm selling it to you. So customers now are pushing to have that digital experience of walking aisle by aisle, looking at things, engaging with it. So now you start seeing the need for different types of technologies coming up, where AI and all these kind of technologies are now creating that digital walk through the shop, where I can look at a product and it tells me what its price is, who built it, and if I'm a health freak and I've registered it as such on your site, it will then give me all the health breakdowns of what is good or bad about that particular product. So that's the things that are driving it, I think. But the last one, which is for me the most important one, is what is actually driving that hunger for digital experience, is the fact that we've started to realize that the amount of accessibility I have is no longer dependent on the amount of petrol I have in my car or the amount of time that I have in my car. I can actually now send out a question and say, do you know anyone that has this particular thing? In the olden days, it would have taken me weekends of going from different shops to look for that unique, bespoke thing that I know that I like because my mother used to buy it. But now with the digital experience, I can actually send my request out into the world and get a response from Russia, Vietnam, China, South Africa, Soweto, within a millisecond of me sending it out. And I think that is where the drivers towards digital, taking into context all these other things I've mentioned, is actually now showing its true value of what that digital experience can bring to the economy and to the people it's trying to serve. Thanks.
Thanks, John. I think you're giving our ages away with Y2K here. I think an important point that you make is there are so many platforms available and data flowing across everywhere and anywhere. And what is this doing in terms of cyber risks to your organizations?
I'm going to say it does nothing, and I'll be lying. So I think the city of Johannesburg has first-hand experience, and I think even the banks, as good as they are, I think we've all gone through a cyber threat. And I think what it has done is it has suddenly made us aware of the value of our data. If I look at what cyber threats really have, whatever they try to achieve at the end of the day is to dispossess you of your data. And to dispossess you of your data, they're going to first make you pay for it. They're going to make you negotiate for it. And then eventually, when you're not playing the game, they're going to dispossess you of it. Because that's the leverage that they have. Because they know that in today's digital economy, if I don't know that John owes me 30 bucks, I'm not going to have somebody in my contact center phoning to say, Mr. Arends, can you make payment arrangements for your 30 rand? Because I won't know that I need to collect 30 rand. I won't even know that I need to invoice this month for X amount, because I won't have that information available. Yes, I will have reports, I will have this, I will have that. And I think what it then allowed us to do is to start looking critically at where our risk matrix sits. And when we had an experience of a cyber attack, there were 5 things that actually saved us. The first thing is the 11th commandment, thou shalt make backups.
Physical backups.
But there is a rider. There is a rider to that. And there's 2 points to that rider. The first one is backups that can be restorable. Okay?
Amen.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying, right? The second one to that backup is the fact that that backup should live in a separate world as the origins of that backup source. Okay? So that's the one thing it taught us. The second thing it taught us that you need to be able, from a backup and from a SOC perspective, be able to create a capacity to start knowing in advance, early warning systems, that I'm about to be hacked, or somebody is phishing, somebody is trying to get into my space. And I think getting your SOC capacitated to the fact where it can then start looking at all these attacks coming in, do mitigations, and do plans and actually implement certain things are very important. I think the third thing it taught us was that whilst we are physically sitting in the same venue, we are all sitting around individual tables. And you need to look at your own environment in that way. You either go through compartmentalizing your infrastructure, or you start putting virtual walls or Chinese walls in between your applications and your data, and in between applications itself, and in between the firewalls that sit between your internal data centers or your external, your intranet, if I can call it that, of users that are in the business, and then actually your client environment. So you start now looking at ways to compartmentalize all these things together to now start dealing with the cyber threat. But I think the last point I want to mention is that your ability to deal with cyber threats is equal to the ability of your people's understanding of what it can mean. So I don't go and click on a link just because somebody in the email says, click here. It's teaching your users how to deal with cyber threats. It's teaching your business why we do things in a specific way so they can understand the cyber component of it. And in fact, what we have done now is that cyber is going to become part and parcel, not just of our KPIs, but also of our job descriptions. Because each one of us have a unique responsibility to ensure that we don't click that link, to ensure that we understand the implications when we deal with things in a specific way. And lastly, is creating awareness amongst our customers, our clients out there, what we are doing in terms of cyber and how it will impact their journey with us. And I believe that once that awareness is created and they understand, they're not going to mind jumping through another hoop. It's no longer an obstacle. It's now, they're going to keep my money in the bank safe. Somebody won't be able to get into my account and transfer. Thank Thank you.
Thanks, John. I think to sum it up then, business today is ultra competitive. They're transforming to data-cultured environments, automating processes, and trying to improve customer experience as well as the digital experience. I'd like to leave everybody with one statement. When setting out your digital customer experience, strategy always ensures that you keep your customers' needs at heart. They're real people, and nothing can digitalize a personal experience. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'd now open the floor for some questions.
Oh, okay, well, there we go.
My name is I just have a question around your employees. Oh, thank you. Okay, I have a question around creating a cyber resilient organization. And I believe that to be able to achieve that, you will need to create the cyber resilient workforce. And I think you have touched on that in empowering your employees as the first line of defense. But now I'm curious to understand, maybe from you, to say what will be one of the effective ways post-pandemic to ensure that you tailor or you create or develop an effective cybersecurity awareness program for your employees, looking at how things are, most people working from home, some organizations have adopted to the hybrid way of working. How can you effectively, deliver a training program that will ensure that your employees are able to identify? You mentioned, the think before you click on the link. You mentioned some other strategies, but then what will be post-pandemic strategies in terms of empowering and training your employees?
Thanks, Tamara. John, would you like to respond?
Okay, thank you very much. When we look at the hybrid workforce environments that we have at the moment, where we've got a combination of people working from home, we've got a combination of people that are actually in an office environment. I think the first thing that you do is around visibility. Visibility in terms of certain key messaging and themes that you have that you want to drive as an organization is important. So whether that be a wallpaper, a background on my machine, a message I have to read at a certain time, that whether it be sitting on a poster wall, whether it be sitting on my laptop or my phone, I think visibility around the key messaging is an important part. The second component to that is updating your user community around cyber experiences. I think when you start sharing the news that we've had an event or we had this attempt, this is what we've done, please take note. People learn then through that experience what is actually happening in the environment. The last one is, I think, is you must be able to survey the mental readiness of your employees. And to do that, we do surveys that can be then either done through your laptop or through a mobile phone, etc., where you do consistent surveys and you do that. But I think the survey part is one element of that survey, because the second part, like I said earlier, is if you put in cyber as part of my job description, if you put cyber in as part of my performance scorecard, and I have to report as an employee, what am I doing, or what are the things that from an end user experience perspective, where I can contribute towards possible cyber issues, or saying that from a cyber perspective, what is it that my requirements are, you're actually keeping cyber as part of the day-to-day. It doesn't become a specialized action. And the problem with a lot of cyber programs is they become a special action. We need to make cyber part and parcel of the workforce, and why we're encouraging it for it to go into a job description is because I don't think people understand the importance of what cyber means in a digital world. Because if cyber fails, your digital fails. Your organization don't have the right or don't have the capability then to actually deliver on those services. And the importance of that, I think, cannot be underestimated at all. Thanks.
Thanks, John. I think an important point is there's no silver bullet. At the end of the day, you've got to understand your maturity levels and keep improving.
Yes.
Thank you. I don't think we have time for another question, or should we take one more?
Can we take one more? Yeah? Okay, the team says, yeah, it's fine. Let's grab one more question.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is 𝐂𝐨𝐧𝐼 𝐿𝐿. I'm from BankservAfrica. My question relates to customer experience. So, seeing that it's the BFSI candidates here, you know, there's this phenomenon of automated call center calls where when you pick up your phone, there is this automated voice that is telling you of a product or something that you might or not need. And I'm making this comment as an end user or a consumer. And it's just a question to say, what sort of research do companies like yourselves do to end up with those strategies? And do you also close back the loop, like do the surveys from customers to find out whether that's actually having the desired impact that you wish to have? Because, I mean, just from my personal experience, I literally drop those calls each time. And I know there's an organization that's paid a lot of money to invest in that automated system. Do we actually go back and check if it's working for us and we're getting the results that we're looking for from that much automation?
Thank you. I think we spoke about the robotization of humans and trying to then, replay a standard answer. Rene, would you like to take that question?
Yeah, I think, if you look at it, and you've summed it up quite beautifully, actually. Why are you actually making a call? Because you want to speak to a human being, right? You don't want to make the call and then, have this voice recording sort of playing to you. And I think you've touched on it beautifully. So if we understand the customer, and, my colleague again touched on it, how we adapt the call centers to be more agile and more adaptable, to be almost human-facing. And I think it's critical to sort of say, let's scale up those call centers in such a way that is giving the customer feedback quite quickly. It's giving the customer a timeous feedback in terms of their personalized experience. So even in the JSE, we're also doing the same thing. We're sort of narrowing down the time to implement or reach the customer from a physical perspective. So I agree with you. That is something from a statistics perspective that you are on the button. And then while I've got the mic, just on the Nedbank question, a model that works beautifully in a different sphere that we found that works quite nicely here in that question was ADCAR. It's a change management model worth looking into.
Thank you. I think important to note then, at the end of the day, understand your customer, understand what they're looking for, but there are still instances or circumstances where someone just wants to know what their balance is. And in that way, a digital experience might be the quickest way to get to that answer. So let's not just always say it has to be a person on the other side of it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Fantastic knowledge and experience shared with everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.